Hello, Malcolm here, and welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tips, episode 291. And today's title is, How long is too long? And how short is too short? When it comes to teaching and preaching, what's too long? What's too short? How do we decide? What should we be thinking about? Let me tell you about a little experiment I did and some thoughts. So recently I put a poll on the community section of my YouTube channel. First time I've done that. And my question was this. What would your ideal Sunday lesson length be, irrespective of teaching style? These are results I got. 15 minutes or less, nobody wants that. 15 to 20 minutes was 13%. 20 to 25 minutes was 25%. 25 to 30 minutes was 13%. And surprising to me, 30 minutes plus was 50%. So half wanted more than half an hour and half wanted less than half an hour, but more than 15 minutes. I thought this was fascinating. It's a limited poll. I only had eight responders, so I'm not claiming this is something that should be universally agreed everywhere, but I did find it interesting. So I thought I would put some ideas out here for us to discuss and think about regarding length. Now, let's think about Jesus for a minute. Jesus was the master, in my mind, of both long lessons and really short ones. You may remember that not so long ago I recorded about the fact that Douglas Jacoby had asked me to do some mini devotionals, only 90 seconds long. It was a tremendous challenge. I enjoyed it. It was hard. It was stressful, actually, but I enjoyed doing that, and I learned a lot in the process. I reckon Jesus would have been brilliant at the 90-second devotional, but he was also excellent at the longer exposition, wasn't he? Think about the Sermon on the Mount. That's not a short lesson, but also the parables. Just before recording this, I looked up Luke 15, verses 1 to 7, the parable of the lost sheep. I read it out loud and timed myself, read it quite slowly. It took 54 seconds. 54 seconds to deliver that parable. That's not very long, is it? Now, Jesus may have taught some more around it, of course, and we would want to do the same today, but there's tremendous impact in that parable in just less than a minute. Jesus could do the short and he could do the long. Again, if you think about Matthew 15 and verse 32, Jesus has compassion on the people who've been with him because they've been with him for how long? 3 days. I'm not suggesting it was 3 solid days of teaching lesson all day, every day as such, but nonetheless, that's a long time to be together, and we know he was teaching in those environments. Long lessons, short lessons. Few things for us to consider. Firstly, the value of longer lessons. The value of a longer lesson is that you can develop your thinking more thoroughly. You can draw more into your main point. You can find other resources to point people to or reference. You're really developing your thinking. You're really developing a point. You're going deep with it and you're going broad, extensive. That helps when you're dealing with something complex or that is hard to describe in a few words. It also means that you can establish a significant point that's necessary for the congregation in a way that they'll hopefully remember that we made a big session of this deliberately because it is so important. There's something in there. Of course, you need the requisite skill to hold the attention of a group for a longer lesson, and that's something that not everybody has. What about shorter lessons? Part of the advantage of a shorter lesson is that it's digestible. I know what that is. It was of the length I can manage. I'm eating a meal, not a 10-course banquet that's going to leave me overstuffed and feeling like I've got indigestion. They're digestible when they're shorter, generally speaking. They hold the attention more easily as long as the preparation is done. But again, you need a particular skill to be able to do, or to develop a particular skill to be able to do a shorter lesson and still make it meaningful, because that's the goal of all the lessons. The goal isn't length, brevity, or extended length. The goal is for it to be meaningful and to have an impact. So let's think about what this means for you and me. I would say, first of all, that we need to think about the goal of the lesson. Before we think about how long or short we want it to be, or others may want it to be, it is helpful to think about how can I make this point, this passage, this text memorable. My goal is that when people come back to a text that I've taught on, they'll remember something of what we talked about. We're going through Thessalonians right now, and I'm hoping that no one in our congregation will go back to the book of Thessalonians the same as before we started that series. They'll come to it with the depth and the breadth and the body of what we talked about in the back of their minds, even if it's a year or two later. And they may not remember exactly things I said or we talked about, but they'll come back to 1 Thessalonians and think, oh, I know this book now. I know more about it because of what we did. So memorable. Second, meaningful. The goal of our lessons is to say something meaningful. And that's more important. So finding the meaning in the text is more important than deciding on the length. Memorable. How can I make this memorable? Meaningful. How can I make it meaningful? And thirdly, for want of a better word, worshipful. That is a worshiping experience. That is there's a sense in which people that are there think, we worshipped with the word today. God, and I suppose what I'm trying to say is that there's a sense that God is present. And again, that is more important than length, whether short or long. So some questions to consider and let me know what you think. Firstly, what length of lesson is your skill set best suited to? Given your skill set, who you are, what length of lesson best suits you most of the time? Not to say you can't vary that, but what actually best suits you? Because that's probably where you should speak most of the time. If you're a 20-minute sermon person or lesson person, stick to 20 most of the time. Shorter ones on some occasions, longer ones on other occasions when they warrant it, and you have to put a bit of extra work in, of course, for those shorter and longer lessons. But if you're a 20-minute person, stick to it. Don't try and do longer or shorter because you think you should. Or if you're a 30-minute person, do 30-minute lessons. Make them great. People won't mind how long they are if they are memorable, meaningful, and worshipful. Second question. What is the most helpful lesson length for your regular speaking context? So where you speak most often, what actually helps that group? Because your group might be quite different to mine. Something to do with attention span or something to do with the age of the group or even the room you meet in, because that can make a difference to people's ability to concentrate. Too hot, too cold, too stuffy, too drafty. It makes a difference. Sitting on comfortable chairs, sitting on hard chairs, or on the floor. These things make a difference. The age of your congregation. So what do you consider is the best, most helpful length for your group? That's a length to get good at, especially if it's not your normal gift or your main gift, that length. Then work at that length, because then you're serving your congregation with what they need. And that is what we're called to do. We are servants of the word for the people God has put in front of us. So my goal, I hope and pray, is not to preach to a certain length because that's right or wrong or because I like it that way. My goal is to deliver a lesson which is memorable, meaningful, and worshipful, and to do that at the right length that's going to meet the needs of the people there. Now, that's quite a challenge, I think, because we all have our preferences and we get into our habits of delivering lessons of a certain length. But Jesus, again, to go back to him, was the master of the micro lesson and the mega extended multi-day seminar set of lessons. He could do it all. Maybe you and I can't quite do it all, but we can do more and more different kinds of lengths and lessons as we grow and learn. So let's grow and learn so that we can always do the length of lesson that's most necessary, whether it's really long or really short. What do you think about this? What are your thoughts about lesson length? I'd like to know. So drop me a line, malcolm@malcolmcox.org, or visit me at the website, malcolmcox.org. And by the way, in the Old Testament, you find parables and lessons from prophets and other people at different lengths. The Psalms, for example, range from a very few number of verses to Psalm 119, such a long one. There's a lot there in the Old Testament. And if you want to learn more about the Old Testament, why not join me on the Old Testament survey module run by the Athens Institute of Ministry for the UK and Ireland, which is in early March. If you'd like to join us, you'd be very welcome to join me, Douglas Jacoby, Andy Bawachi, as we teach Old Testament survey. Drop me a line, malcolm@malcolmcox.org, if you'd like more details about that. Well, I think that'll do it for today. I've gone on long enough. Hope it wasn't too long. Hope it wasn't too short. Until the next time, keep calm and carry on teaching. Take care and God bless.